All right. Looks like we're live here. Hoping you guys can hear me okay. Let me know if it's all clear. Nice to see you, Petra. Great to see you, Sasha. Ina. Sorry, you know what? I'm terrible at pronouncing people's names. Ina. Anyhow, Ina. Hoping again you can hear me. Let me know if it's a problem. Of course, if you can't hear me, then you won't know that that's what I'm asking. That's a little bizarre. Okay, I'm just going to scoot over here and I'm going to turn this down a bit. Okay. Hi. Hi, Anne. Nice to see you. Hoping this is coming through clear. And okay, thanks, Sasha. Appreciate. Kind of a fun subject today. This is something that I've started to do a little bit recently. I don't know if you know the artist Patrick Lee, young fella who really does some beautiful work. I really like his work a lot. You find him on Facebook. And he works kind of in a Notan way of breaking his subjects down, breaking his images down. So I want to talk about that a little bit today. But before I do that, I want to say hi to everyone who's signing in. Thanks for showing up. Really appreciate it. It's been a long day today. I had to teach an intensive independent studies course this morning, so I had 3 hours in on that. And yesterday was a crazy day. I had 3 different classes going through the whole day. So I'm going to try and stay awake and hopefully don't put you to sleep while I'm talking today. Again, thanks for showing up. If you had a chance to look at the discussion Stefan and I had, I believe he's posted it twice now. I think he posted it once earlier today, and once the day or 2 days back. Just, how do you get inspired? How does that work? What do you need to do to organize yourself before you start to paint? Those are subjects that we tried to cover. And, I'm hoping that we'll do more of those things. That would be really nice. Nice to see you, Andrew. Thanks for showing up. And Anne, great. This is great. Nice to see you. Okay, I'm hoping that what I show you today will help you with your compositions. I know it's helped me. So sometimes I'm really not sure what to do when I'm looking at an image, a photo that I've taken, and I know there's something in the photograph that I really like, but I'm not sure what it is. And so sometimes what I do is I make a Notan. Now, when I say a Notan, this kind of comes from the old Japanese and Chinese way of creating an image that is basically black and white. That's what it is. What I'm going to show you is kind of maybe a step beyond that or 2 steps beyond that, because I want to be more comprehensive in the way that I'm thinking about the values in my composition. But a great practice for you is either working from photos, or if you're outside with a sketchbook, or you're sitting somewhere in a restaurant or cafe or something with a sketchbook, to take a big fat black marker and just try and create an image out of just black and white with large shapes. And what it does is it abstracts things somewhat, and it helps you to contain the lights to the light area and the darks to the darker area. And I think that when you see things in black and white this way, it gives you an opportunity to create a more powerful composition, because you can change things around. You can move a shape over a little. Maybe you need a lighter area. You want to balance things, or you want to make something more dynamic. If you can see it in black and white, it will probably work in color. So I'm working from a photo that I took actually on the weekend out of a car window as we were traveling. this past weekend. And I just thought we were in the country a little bit, and I just thought some of the shapes were kind of fun. You know, there are long fields and there are trees and there's a barn and all this kind of stuff. So I just thought, you know, can I use a Notan to get me there? If you're trying to, if you want to get an app, I know you can get it with Apple through their App Store, but this is something called Notanizer. So Notanizer. No, so this is something that you can use on your iPad or your phone even if you want to, and just bring an image in on this app, and it will break it into values for you. You can get straight black and white, that'll do that for you, or you can break it into, I think, as many as 4 different values, and it just simplifies everything for you from a photograph, which is kind of neat. If you have Procreate by any chance, you can then take that to Procreate and play with that a little further. If you want to move your shapes around a little more, you know, simplify things a little more, you can do that. And I do that as well sometimes. And then it gives me kind of a basis from which to begin my painting. Nice to see you, Jeanette. Happy to see everyone here. This is great. Petra, of course. Again, simplification. If you can simplify things down to the bare essence, just the simplest shapes, your painting will have more impact. You know, you're going to have more punch in your paintings, if I can say that. So it's really important to think about. A lot of people start with a composition, and it's kind of, you know, it's not working. If the composition is not working, maybe you'll get your color working, maybe your drawing will work, maybe your brush work is great, but if the composition isn't there, it doesn't have the impact. It doesn't mean that you have to have a super fancy, you know, flashy composition. It can be very calm. It can be very, very gentle and very calm. That's okay too. You know, how dynamic you want to make a composition is really up to you. But if you can simplify it into its simplest black and white form, or maybe 2 or 3 values, that's at least going to give you a direction to aim for, so that you hold on to the important shapes. It's the big shapes in a painting that make a painting work better. And it's hard to imagine, you know, because we get into all these little details, and we love the detail because that's exciting. But really, it's those big, simple shapes that make a painting strong. And I think if you were to look at the paintings that most impress you over time and break them into simple shapes, I can't help but think of Soroya's work, you know, this way. His compositions were very interesting. He was an amazing painter, of course. But if you look at Soroya's work and just look at the negative shapes, look at the positive shapes and how they work with each other to create something dynamic, this is a good way to get to it. Nice to see you, Alice, all the way from Greece. I know you're painting out there. We saw a nice post from you on Facebook. And Dorit, nice to see you here. Welcome. So great to see all these folks tuning in today. And while I'm thinking about it, if you like what you're seeing, please, a thumbs up. It means something, you know, when I see that. It's encouraging. And if you send the link to friends, or if you want to repost this on Facebook, I'll post the results today with the link for YouTube. And it's just, you know, great for me, for exposure for me. And there are people who I know are following and appreciate getting a few tips when it comes to painting. Sasha, yes, the value study on Apple iOS is also able to do it, and it's free also, which is great. So you can push your values on the iOS platform. When you go into photo edit, you have the 3 little circles, and you can go to those 3 little circles on the left hand side, And you can look at all kinds of different ways of that, of, you know, turning that image into something that's more intense on the warm side, more intense on the cool side. And it also takes you into black and white options as well. Thanks, Jeanette. All your thumbs up. Appreciate that. Really do. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to show you. Okay, this is not. I would say this is a Notan, but it's taken a little further than just the simple black and white. Okay, I'm going to move this over so this is large, and this is just so you know, because I didn't have time to do this in oil. This is acrylic right now, and I'm going to paint over this with oil. It's okay to do this, by the way. A lot of people get concerned about, you know, paint, like mixing medium. You don't want to paint acrylic over oil, but you can paint oil over acrylic. It's a rough enough surface, it's going to hold. Ideally, it's nice to paint oil over oil, which is really fun. I've just done this for the sake of speed. So this is dry. I did this yesterday because I knew the oil wouldn't be dry. And I want to paint right over top of these gray values. Sometimes you just put a gray value over the entire canvas, and then you can do your you know, black over top of that, and then maybe punch white in afterwards. I've got 3 values going here. So I have my black, my white, and I have 2 grays. I have a lighter gray and a darker gray. And I guess when I was mixing things up a little bit, I got into a couple of slightly darker grays. But, you know, when you squint at this, it all kind of comes together. And I left a little indication of some of the things that I want to show when I'm getting into the color, so that it just reminds me that I want to have that action, that way of bringing the eye into the painting. I love the simplicity of a Notan because they, you know, especially in black and white, because they allow you to imagine the colors. You can take colors from another image that you have, or another painting, or something that inspires you color-wise. Start with this kind of image here, and pull those colors into a subject like this, because you've already broken it down into values. So that, you know, really I could go with almost any color in this. I'm going to try and kind of go more realistic in this, a little bit more figurative, but you can use any colors as long as the values are correct. And you probably saw Stefan's live stream on how you can have like even really bizarre colors and still make it work in black and white. I like to have color harmony. I've pre-mixed a bunch of colors that I'm going to use ahead of time. I've been doing that lately. So anyhow, I'll get into this. Somnath, thanks for checking in on us here. And of course, this is going to be reposted to YouTube, so you can always go back and watch the whole program from beginning to end. And Jeanette, yes, I like Notan paintings too. They're a lot of fun, and they get you thinking about things compositionally. So without going too much further, yakking away, if you have any questions, by the way, please feel free to ask. I'll try and keep my eye on the notes that are coming in, hoping that my phone doesn't cut out on me. If it does, I'll come back to you. I'm getting better at coming back to you. I don't know, the technology still gives me trouble, but we'll see what we can do here. Okay, I'm going to try and kind of start from the top of this and work my way down. I like, when I'm painting a landscape, if I'm painting plein air, I usually will work from the background to the foreground, because when you do that, of course, you're painting over things that are already behind it, and it also gives you a sense of the overall color feel when you've got your sky working, when that's keyed properly. So I'm just going to try and get some color going here, and we'll see how this goes. This probably won't take very long. You know, this might be a shorter session today. So let's see. Welcome, Barrett. Nice to see you. Okay. So I'm just going to get right into this. I'm going to go kind of with my middle value, light gray value here. And let's see if we can get a color in there that sort of makes sense. I've pre-mixed colors, like I said, and I'm just going to put them in. Sometimes if I've got a gray underneath, I'll let that show through on edges. And this is a little bit of a different technique in a way because, you know, it's again, fresh color over a gray always looks really nice. And because that gray sort of pushes the sense of the color, it accents it. Maybe getting a little bit of a glare there, but anyhow, we'll work with what we got. And now, again, I'm using oil right over top of this, a pre-mixed color that I had already. It's Old Holland color. I actually bought a Viridian, two different Viridians of Old Holland, and they're in Canada, they're super expensive. It's like, it would be like the equivalent of 50 euros for a tube, which is just insane, but I love the color. So, you know, you pay for what you love, I guess. That's how it works. I'm just dipping into a little bit of a combination of linseed oil and a thinner here so that I can just make this a little smoother. I really want to keep these shapes as much as I can because I like the way they worked in black and white. So why not? You know, just use the color, shapes that are down there to give, because you got your composition worked out. If you like the composition, why would you change it too much? Unless in the middle of all the color you decide, well, you know what, I think I should push something one way or another. But I'm going to try and stick as much as I can to pretty much to this these values and keep my composition going. Okay. I'm hoping I'm hoping that this is working now. I'm actually talking to my phone. I'm not even talking through a mic anymore. So let me know if this is actually working for you guys, if this is if you can hear me. That would be a good thing if you could hear me. Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Alice. Very frustrating. Okay, it's super frustrating when these things are, they keep changing things up also with the technology. I know I'm not even sure that this is going to Facebook right now because that was cutting out as well. So, uh, I don't know. I think all these companies fight over the technology and they don't update the way they're supposed to. I don't want to be paranoid about this, but I think all of these tech companies are just wanting to grab everyone and keep them, in their own apps as much as they can. So there we go. YouTube sound is back. Good. I don't know if this is even showing on Facebook. If anyone's watching on Facebook, of course, they can't leave a comment. Okay, so I've got a couple of blues going here. I'm going to go in with a lighter, even lighter blue in the background here in this area. And let's just see how that works. And if you wonder how I'm deciding on these colors, I went into something called U-Camera, which posterizes your image down, and it kind of pushes the colors a little bit. It's kind of a neat little app as well, and it's fun to play with these apps. I don't want to get hooked on them, but use apps in a way that make your life easier. If the color is something that you want to play with, well, get into an app that plays with the colors. You can also do this, of course, with iOS, with Apple, and push colors around there. You can intensify the colors when you want to, add more chroma. There are loads of different ways of doing this. There are posterizer apps. But the one today, if you want to look it up, is Notanizer. And it's a fun app to play with. So, Zeus, welcome. I'm using oil paint over top of an acrylic painting that I had done earlier. And I usually don't, paint like that, but I didn't have a lot of time to let it dry. So I just went with the acrylic to give me a little extra time for things to dry up. And that way I can just go over it with oil. And this will be fine. Like a lot of people get worked up over painting over acrylic, but I know there are a lot of artists that start out with acrylic and just paint right over top of oil. Some of the purists are going to get excited about that, but that's what can you do. All right. I see there's Robert here. Nice to see you. Pre-mixing the color ahead of time is a really nice way of keeping your color clean. Another way of keeping your color clean, of course, is working with a palette knife. And actually, all of this stuff, by the way, the Notan, I did with a palette knife. And that's something else. When you're creating a black and white image or one that's just values, try and use a palette knife to do it because it forces you to simplify your shapes. As soon as you get into brushwork like this, the temptation is to get too precise and too fiddly and mess around with it. You don't want to do that with a Notan. You want as much as possible to keep the shapes big and bold and simple, and you can still create the effect that you want in the composition. So this is just going over stuff that I put down already with a palette knife. And I didn't get very detailed in it. These are just really simple shapes, and hopefully they'll read well when I'm done. You're welcome, Robert. Happy to answer any questions. Gouache is a really nice medium to work with. If you haven't tried it, if you like gouache, I can recommend casein also. There's a company I know for years, it was called Shiva casein, and we used to use it in the studio years ago. And what I liked about it was that you have the chance to move the paint around, for as much as 24 hours. It's dry to the touch very quickly, within minutes. But if you put a little water into it, you can move that color around. It's kind of gives you the feeling of oil paint, but it's not. It's not as, creamy as oil paint. But casein was something that a lot of the older artists used to start their paintings with. And casein is actually the binder in it. Well, it's a milk binder, and so casein will adhere very well to a canvas. And once it's dry, it really has a beautiful quality to it. If you want to keep it just as a casein painting, you can gently rub the surface and it gives you a nice sheen that's not too shiny. It's sort of like somewhere in between shiny and matte. It's like eggshell, I would guess you would say. And you have this lovely look to it. But you can also paint over top of it with oil, which is really cool too, because you can do your underpainting. It's dry fairly quickly, and then you can go over top of that with oil later. Okay, now I want to get into some of the, well, I'm going to actually add a couple of highlights in here as well. I notice you're getting a bit of glare on this. Sorry about that. It's one of the joys of oil. But I'm going to put in just a few little spots of highlights that, again, I'll post this on Facebook, maybe Instagram as well, so that you can see what this looks like as a finish. And I'll post it with the link for this as well, so that you can review this if you want to, or share it with anyone else. Again, really appreciate when you do that. And I'm just popping things in here just to give a little more highlight. These lighter colors are kind of shiny, I see, with the lighting I have on this. Robert, you can move the casein around a little bit for up to about 24 hours. I haven't actually tried to take it right off, like remove it right away, completely. But you can change your colors and you can move the casein around a little bit. It's kind of like a watercolor that way, yeah, somewhat like a watercolor. So, all right, now I'm going to go into, well, some of the foliage back here, some of the trees. And I'm going to start with a darker green. This is a Viridian. This is actually a pure Old Holland Viridian. And it's actually Viridian light, believe it or not. It feels pretty, well, actually, I'm gonna grab a grade Viridian. That might be even better. In the shadows, I'm going to keep just a bit of color here. It's probably going to show shiny for you. Yeah, it does. I'm just going to keep my darks. I don't want to end up with a black and white painting. Even though this is a Notan, I don't want it to be a black and white painting when I'm done. So I'm just going to, introduce some colors into the shadows. In the shadow areas, you can really play with color if you want to. As long as the value is correct, I could bring violets in and blues just to show you what that might look like. I'm going to bring in a little bit of a blue. Let's see, I don't know if you'll pick up on the subtleties of this, but I can bring in a little bit of blue, a few different colors into the shadow areas or the dark areas here, because we're no longer into Notan territory here. We're just using the Notan as a compositional tool, and I can bring in little bits of color just to play with them in these areas here. I could go into reds, again, I could go into violets, whatever you want. As long as the values are really close to each other, you can do a lot of this stuff, and it's really fun. And you can see how quickly this goes. It's kind of, in a way, it's kind of like a paint by number. Um, it's really kind of a strange thing to say, but you know, I remember doing a lot of paint by numbers as a kid. All right. Now I want to go into some of the light areas that I see in these trees. Let's just pick up a little more intense green. And I've gone from dark to light here. So I'm just going to pick up the edges here of these trees. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Group of Seven. They're a bunch of Canadian artists, you know, that go back into the, the middle of the last century. And they were very famous. If you want to look up a guy who really knew how to paint the Canadian landscape, his name was Tom Thomson. Now, he actually wasn't officially one of the Group of Seven, but he inspired a bunch of painters who painted, I would say, in a similar way. And they're very designed looking in a sense, but they really capture the Canadian landscape. And they're extraordinary paintings. Look up Tom Thomson, that's Thomson, and see what you think of his work. When Stefan was visiting here in Toronto, we went up to see a gallery that's full of their work in a place called Kleinburg. If you come to Canada, you know, come to Toronto, I'll give you a tour. You can come. I'll be happy to take you there and show you. It's always inspiring to see these guys. But they simplified their paintings very much like this, where they broke it down into simple shapes. Tom Thomson in particular seemed to be able to capture the right values, get his colors going so that they're very believable landscapes. Really, you get the essence of the feeling. I'm going to go into a slightly lighter green here now, just to pick up here and there, so we have a sense of there's a bit of volume going here. And I'm not even concerned so much right now, but the direction of light, interestingly. It seems like it's more overhead and just catching the tops of these clouds. So it's catching a little bit the tops of the trees as well. And you can bring in little bits of almost like halftones in a sense, although actually these are more like highlights than halftones. I want to punch a little more color into these shadow areas. I want to get some richer, darker values here and there. So I'm going to do that. And I also want to go in with maybe some reds, which will punch up the greens a little, because it's a complement color. It does that. So I haven't actually mixed up a red ahead of time, but I have some alizarin crimson out. And I'm just going to bring a little bit of that into play. Let's just see. If I take pure alizarin crimson and put it in, I think it's going to be a little too much. So I'm going to just knock it down a little bit with a green-gray. And just, well, maybe I can afford to bring a little more into it. Let's see what happens. Okay, that's not too bad. It gives a little more life to the shadows. You can have lots of life in the shadows. They don't have to be dull. You can bring nice color into those shadows, and keeping the color closer to the focal area, or the focal point, which I've talked about in past discussions, that really brings some energy in. I'm just going to do something here. Okay, just touching my phone might keep it active. I really don't know. So now and then I just have to remember to do that. Okay. Just going to pop a few more of these rich darks and alizarins in here. And maybe out towards the edge it can get a little darker there. That's about as much contrast as I want to get going back there. Usually the greatest areas of contrast is in the foreground. Okay. Jeanette, autoplay had switched off again. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. Hi, Jerry. Welcome. Let me know if you can't hear me. I guess that's the deal. Because right now it's going through my phone, which is not the way I wanted to do this today, but you know, I've had these troubles. So I'm going to bring this shadow over a little further here, this way, because I see that underneath the trees. And I'm going to do something here. I'm going to get into this value area right here. Because I want to punch the lighter color over top of that. So this light slash that comes across the middle here, I'll put that on afterwards. I think here, though, I'm going to get a bigger brush going. And let's just see. I'm going to grab this color here. Again, you can't see my colors, but this is just for sake of time. I want to keep my colors really simple. It's a lot bigger brush I'm working with here, as you can see. And it's really going nicely over that acrylic. It's nice and smooth. This is sort of more of a graphic feeling, this painting, if I can say that. I want to get that kind of a little bit of a cleaner, more modern feel to this painting. I think it's kind of nice because it you know, we look at all these old paintings everywhere, and I love the old masters' works, I really do. But I also find sometimes, you know, they're very brown or very gray looking. And I know at one point when I was painting in the cafes, well, they were kind of yellowy gray in the cafes. The colors there, lots of smoke, nicotine on the walls. But I do like to see some nice fresh color. You know, we have some great color available to us. Those old masters didn't have as many available to them, but they did extraordinary things with the colors they had. So, thanks, Robert. Appreciate. I'm having fun doing this. It's going fairly quickly, I think. I haven't checked the time. Oh yeah, 2:38. A little bit of prep time, little preparation time, doing your Notans ahead of time, it makes such a big difference, you know, because you have something to work to. You have some shapes to work to. And it makes a big difference if you've done your preparation time, worked out your values and the composition. The nice thing about doing your Notan ahead of time is that especially if you're working with acrylic, it dries very quickly. You can change your mind about where you want things to be. And I changed these shapes around a number of times because I wanted to get a particular feel to these big shapes down here. And who knows what they are, actually. Who knows what these shapes are? Is something in the foreground? Is it a shadow from a tree? I mean, we really don't know. I know from the photo that I'm working from that it's just a different kind of vegetation. But you don't know that, and I don't have to paint it that way. I like the idea of having something left to the imagination. I think it's just more interesting to leave something for the viewer to figure out. Okay, and again, this is a large flat area. I want to bring in a little bit of something that takes my eye up into this area here. Our eyes are attracted to light, so. Okay. Now, okay. Jeanette, you see this stream in Facebook, not in YouTube. Very strange. I have no idea what's going on. Hopefully you guys are all able to check in and see this okay. If I get this technology figured out, or maybe it's they're messing with me. I don't know. So I'm just going to go into these colors here and bring something that takes my eye up to this area right here. And I don't have to, you know, this is an interpretation of the scene that I have. I don't have to follow it exactly. Like there's no rule that says I have to follow it because it's there, because that's what I took a photo of. In fact, I'm taking it quite a distance away from the photo when you look at it this way. If I were to show you the photo, you'd see that. So I'm just going to bring these shapes down because it gives me a sense of something coming to the focal area, which is in here. It's nice to see a few new people here today. This is really great. Thanks for tuning in. I really do appreciate it when I'm having new faces. Those of you who haven't watched any of my streams before, in the past ones I've mentioned that when I get enough subscribers, which is actually 500 by the way, which isn't a whole lot of subscribers compared to some people, but when I do, I'm going to have a draw. It'll be a random draw for anyone who's subscribed, and they're going to end up with a painting. We'll figure out how that works. And I just think that, you know, it's a thank you for checking in on me. I do really appreciate it when you do. Okay, so the palette knife is another great tool to get some nice textures going. I also want to break that up a little bit so I can soften edges here and there. I can go into areas back here just to create a little more interest. And you know, the grasses were not this green, by the way, but I'm pushing the color here, really pushing it, because I wanted to create a little bit more excitement here that takes your eye up into this area here. We see more detail in the foreground. Okay. I'm hoping you guys can still hear me. I wish I spoke German better, because that would help, I think. I get scolded by my German friends for not learning it better. Okay. I'm going to put another green in here. It's a darker green into this really dark area. I don't want it to all be, you know, black. I'm now getting away from the Notan idea a little bit because I started with the Notan as a compositional tool. So that's just something to think about. It's a way of giving you some composition without it forces you to simplify. That's what it does. That's what a Notan does. It forces you to simplify and bring your colors into a relationship with each other in the simplest possible form, in straight black and white or just 2 or 3 grays. That's it. So, and I'm liking that color, the way that's working so far. I'm letting the texture of the canvas underneath come through, and that just gives a little bit more depth. I'm just going to pop a couple more darks in here. This is a point where, you know, when I do want to stick as much as I can to my original composition, but of course, when you're doing these things, you should be thinking about your drawing all the time. Is there something that will make this more interesting? Do I need to put something else in here to give this more depth? I'm going to bring in another green. It's a little warmer green. So you have warmer colors in the foreground and cooler colors in the background. And let's see what happens when we do this. Again, I'm keeping that kind of action going where my eye is being drawn up towards the top. Now this value here, may be detracting or taking away from some of the darks that I have in there before. So I can always go back in if I need to punch those darks up. I've got a darker color right here, and I can bring a little bit of that in, a little more contrast. It's okay to do that. And I also want to bring some of the warmer lights that I see in here that happen in the grasses. And this is, with the palette knife, it leaves shapes that feel a little more natural somehow. It's good to move your palette knife in different directions so that they don't look monotonous. I want to get that sense of the lights and the values, drawing my eye up into the center here, up into the middle. Okay. I also think it wouldn't be a bad idea to bring a little bit of that violet down into my dark areas here. So I'm going to do that. Get a little more intensity of color in the shadows, which are closer to us. Okay. Let's just see what happens if I do this. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that color. I didn't pre-mix this color. It's just intuitive at this stage. But I do like that violet. So I'm going to mix a little more of that. Bring a little bit more of this into the scene. And again, I want to be careful with my values. Make sure that my values, make sure it's the right light or darkness when you're doing these things. I'm trying not to mix my colors up too much either, because when you do that, they start to get a little muddy, and that can be really distracting. It can take away from all that great color that you get going. It's also a time when you can pop in a couple of surprise colors, by the way. When I say surprise, again, this is an intuitive thing. I'm going to put a little bit of a blue in here, just because, again, roughly the same value. Maybe there's some flowers in here. I have no idea what this is about. I'm just working intuitively at this stage just to see if we can get a little more interest going in the color in the foreground. Maybe I'm taking it too far. I don't know. We'll see. I can always knock it back again if I have to. All right, now I'm going to go into this area up here, which is a strong focal area that cuts right across the canvas here. And I'm going to do this with a palette knife. I may go back and just change a few things with a brush if I need to. But let's just see if I can get a little bit of nice clean color across this area here. The palette knife is one of those things, if you pick it up on the edge and control it, you can get some nice clean work going with it. It's a good idea if you're doing color charts to practice your color charts with a palette knife, because it teaches you how to use it. And it's a great tool if you want to get nice clean color down. Okay. Nice to see you, Carl. Welcome. Happy to have folks showing up. This is really great. Appreciate it. Some people here today I haven't seen before, so that's always really nice. Thank you. Had some tech issues. All of you, any of you who have been watching me for a while know that's kind of normal. Sadly, I need to get that sorted out. So I want to get that nice, clean, bright color happening up against these areas here, because I want your eye to be drawn back there. Now, in my Notan, I kept that very clean. If I wanted to, I could vary that up a little bit here when I'm going at it with color, but I don't want to mess with the composition that I had because I liked it a lot. But what I could do, maybe to create a little more interest here, is just break this area just a little right here so that our eye is led into this zone right here. It's a small thing, but it just gives us an entry point right there. It softens that ever so slightly. Okay. I'm going to go back into that blue that I have, pop a little, or that violet. I'm going to pop a little in here. And again, it's at the right value you can do this. Now, I haven't done anything on the barn right here, and this is that's what this is here. It's a little barn, and I want to get color in there that is different from everything else. So I have a gray, and you wouldn't think, well, why would I put a gray in, because it's not as exciting. But if you have a color that's not like any other color out there, your eye is drawn to it. So I'm going to try this and just see if this works. I'm letting the texture of the canvas underneath show through. And I also I'm going to bring in another color. And again, I'm working kind of intuitively here. I'm going to bring in a cadmium orange, which may or may not work. I have to be careful when I do this because, again, it is so different from all the other colors down there, it might get too much attention. So I'm just going to squeeze a bit of that out. And I'm going to put very little bit of that in. Just maybe in the roof areas here. So I also want to be careful when I put it in that it has some harmony. So believe it or not, I'm going to gray it ever so gently so that it's not a pure cadmium orange, which I think would be too intense. I'm just going to drag my brush into this here a little bit and up in here as well. And okay, it's not too bad. I don't mind that. I'm going to go in with the blue against that blue violet in here as if it's a shadow. And on the other side of that, I'm going to pick up some of the light blue that I see from the sky. So you've got the blue and orange, which are complement colors against each other. And that little touch of orange right there, I'm going to punch it up just a little more. Gives me a bit of a vibration in color there. Now, I'm really not sure if I like it, honestly, when I look at it. It's almost too strong. I need to go back into that and cool it ever so slightly, just with a bit of violet. But because it's a color that hasn't appeared anywhere else in the painting, our eye is drawn to it. And that gray that I put into the side of the barn here, I'm just going to add a little bit more chroma to that, a little bit more color, so that it's a little more exciting right there. And there's like a silo kind of thing that happens in here. Get that going, and maybe bring a bit of a alizarin crimson into this area down in here. So now we've got a few little colors there that say, hey, there's a building back there. Okay, now I'm going to go back in and just punch up a little bit of the green that's in front of that. And that's a fairly intense green. Maybe it even picks up a little bit of the light that we see here. And that will give us a sense of light hitting not just that surface, but some of the other ones back in here as well. over here I've got an area that's not resolved, so I'm just going to, drop a little bit of color. I think I'm going to go with a little darker color over there, just because it's not an important area. I'm going to keep it soft. Now I could go into this and really soften things down, but if I do, it's kind of going to take away from the character of the textures that are happening. So I want to make sure that I'm not, I don't do too much of that softening stuff. I want to make sure that overall there's this sense of texture and rhythm and a feel of surface, which is really helping to give this a little more believability, I think. That's funny. Jeanette, you're seeing a different conversation over there on Facebook? That's strange. Maybe it's delayed a little? It's very strange. Maybe it's not real time. I don't know why the last couple of live streams that I did, Facebook didn't even show what I was doing, so I have no idea why. Okay. I do want to punch a little bit more color into the sky. We've got a lot of stuff going here. I want to try this. I don't know how well this is going to work. I've got another blue ready here. Maybe it'll be too much. We'll find out. I'm just going to drop some in and see. Sometimes I can see these things better on my screen. When I'm looking at it, it's smaller. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. So, and I don't want to get too busy either. I want to lead the eye down to this area. So I'm going to bring some of that color down that way. And at this stage, it's almost a little bit more graphic. It's funny because when I look at this, in a sense, it's like painting a Notan into a Notan, if that makes any sense. I'm really looking at the big shapes, the big values, and trying to keep the shapes interesting. If I'm going to do that there, I might want to pick something up on the other side, but I don't want it to be the same. When I say that, it can be the same color, but I don't want it to be the same shape. So I'm going to just maybe pop something in here and let it fall in behind those clouds there. Connect the two. Try to keep variety in your negative shapes as much as possible. Like each negative shape should be a little different. And the same thing happens for clouds. I also like the number 3. When you can use 3 things, 3 colors in a painting in different areas that lead you over, and they're all different in shape, that all helps to create more interest and excitement. And maybe I can connect what's happening here with what's happening over here. And that gives me a little more interest towards the middle of the painting. If I'm going to create something that brings my eye down, I want to have wider shapes near the outside edges and narrow shapes that create kind of arrows that point into this. All right. I'm very tempted to take that blue that I just used there and have a couple of hits of that somewhere in these areas. So I'm just going to do that here and there because the sky does reflect into the ground in leaves and so on. You can really see that when you're looking at nature. The sky reflects into the ground, into the foliage of the vegetation. And again, I don't want to start getting too fussy and too picky at this stage. I just want to keep it fresh without going overboard. Now I want to outline that barn just a little more. Right in here. Like drawing with the palette knife, because it forces you to focus and it keeps shapes simple. And you get these little accidental things that happen in underneath as well, which I like. Maybe this side here needs to be knocked into shadow a little more. Okay. So now it's at a stage where, you know, I could fuss and pick away at this for a long time. I just want to get rid of some of the canvas that I see coming through, some of the lighter areas. And these are very, all I'm doing is taking a dry brush, going into these areas just to soften. So I get rid of some of those whites that I don't need. And, you know, now and then you leave a little white. If it's right in the right place, then you leave it alone. You can have a bit of white canvas show through. There's nothing wrong with that. Some artists work with that. But I like to kind of pull things together a little bit so it's a little cleaner. Okay. Let's see, what are we? 3:01. And okay, this is like an hour. I'm into this an hour. And I think I'm almost at the point where I just want to touch up a couple of spots and I'll be done. So I'm going to do this. I'm looking at these shapes and seeing they're a little bit similar in size. That's a little smaller. I'm going to make it even smaller. I'm just going to do this. I think that's a little more interesting. It's always good to get back from your work, and I'm not doing that here in the studio with you today so much. But I'm going to bring a little bit more into this so that I'm breaking that shape up a little more. That becomes more dominant now. And you'll notice that I'm turning my brush towards the focal area. It doesn't have to be directly at it, but it does help lead your eye towards that. And I can do that over here a little bit also. Just a little more. So we're looking at rhythms and ways of getting into the painting. Maybe I need to bring a little bit of that here. Just a little. And maybe over here too. I can knock that back just a touch so it softens that edge a little more. If you find there are edges that just are out of context or don't make sense in a painting, you go back and deal with those. Okay. Now I've broken those two apart, which is not what was happening with the Notan, as you know, but I'm giving the viewer a better path into this. And I don't want to, again, I don't want to overdo this, because this is the stage where you can really make a mess of it if you're not careful. You shouldn't be so careful that you're afraid of it, because you can always overpaint it, right? That's a fact. But you also don't want to get so fussy that every brushstroke becomes precious, and because that can be a problem. So I'm just going to go in, jam some fresh color in here, like I mean it, and brushstrokes shouldn't all happen in exactly the same direction, I don't think. It adds more interest if they don't. That was getting a little muddy there. And I think at this stage, I think I'm going to call it. I think if I keep messing with this, it's just going to get worse. So, all right, I'm hoping that was interesting. It went a little quicker today than I thought it might. But hopefully there's something you can learn. I may fiddle with this a little bit more just to touch up a few areas that that just need a little more finesse. Um, I'm hoping you learned something today. This is really fun. Again, you can get an app called the Notanizer, which is something you can get through the App Store with Apple, and give it a try. Try and simplify your work down to some really big basic shapes in black and white, or maybe two or three values, and see if that doesn't add some strength to your composition. Because I think that this is a really good way to force you to simplify your paintings and get stronger compositions. If you like this, again, thumbs up. Please pass the link on to other people who you think might be interested. There are a lot of younger people who can't afford art lessons, or are maybe just interested and want to watch to see if maybe they want to try some of these things someday. And for those of you who are experienced painters, of course, a lot of this stuff you know already. But it never hurts to refresh your memory. It never hurts to see what other artists are doing, because you can really pick up some great tips, and it kind of gets you thinking a different way. I do like looking at other artists' works because I find that I'm intrigued by how they resolved certain things, and that goes from the old masters up to modern painters. You can learn from anyone who's painting. You can learn. I always say that every painting is a teacher, because when it's not working, it's taught you what not to do. Um, so if it's not working, then you want to sort of figure out, well, why? How come that's not working? That's just really, sort of strange. I had all the right colors and the values are right. And, sometimes it comes down to composition. And so that's the point of today's live stream. Think about your composition, simplify it into just a simple black and white form in the beginning, and use that as a tool, or as a way of getting to a stronger image in the end. So thanks a bunch. I see Stefan's even here. Nice to see you, Stefan. Thank you. Sasha, thanks. Carl, thanks so much. Robert, appreciate those folks who haven't been here before, for showing up. And again, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Really appreciate when you do that, because then you can stay in touch, and it adds to the number of people watching. It becomes exponential over time. So I look to Stefan all the time to learn from him. He's got so many followers, and for good reason, because his live streams are just brilliant. So okay, I'm going to call it now. Have a great it'll be evening where you are, and it's afternoon for me. Stay safe, happy painting, and I will see you next Friday. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, Anne. Bye-bye.